It was a nasty kind of ending to it all. That was supposed to be a very glorious year, which it certainly was for a large portion of it. And Dillon Gabriel, if he can execute the offense, why not? We saw Joe Flacco punt a couple times with his arm.
Yep.
We saw some bad Joe Flacco, even though we had seen some great Joe Flacco for the Cleveland Browns a couple years back. Feels like a quarterback change was inevitable. And with how good their defense is, I don't think it's over for this Cleveland Browns team. If Dillon Gabriel can come in there and play some ball, why Dillon Gabriel is his size, which is certainly not the size of other quarterbacks. Certainly Carson Wentz, who is very tall. I mean Carson is a
big boy,
large individual. But let's talk about Dillon Gabriel. And the only knock really is, can he see? Is he going to be able to handle it all? How about some big time shots? We've seen undersized, and we're only saying undersized because in real life they're normal size, more athletic, more jacked than most people. On a football field, though, at that particular position with who you're standing behind and who is trying to tackle you, size seemingly can't.
Something is definitely undeniably off in Cleveland. The official depth chart may be screaming Gabriel over Shedeur, but according to the one and only Pat McAfee, there is a hidden explosive reason for this decision, and that reason has the entire Browns fan base spiraling with more speed and ferocity than a patented Cleveland turnover. So what exactly did Pat McAfee uncover? Is it a case of toxic politics festering in the locker room? Is it a wave of immense pressure coming down from upstairs? Or is it just pure, beautiful, unadulterated chaos, cleverly disguised as a strategy? Whatever it is, this entire situation is now rapidly devolving into the single most dramatic quarterback saga the city has seen since the infamous Baker Mayfield farewell tour. And this time, the truth might just be even crazier than the rumors.
Shedeur is way better than Dillon Gabriel. He just is. If Shedeur had started from the start, game one against Cincinnati at home, they would be the talk of the NFL right now because I look at the fourth quarter yesterday, they go 0 for 4 on third down because Dillon was playing not to lose. Don't throw it to them, don't put it on the ground. And he did a great job of that. But on one of those third downs, you have to try to make a play to win the football game. And trust me, no matter what Stefanski called, Shedeur would try to win the football game because it's how he was raised. You're going to make a play because you were born to make a play.
And the entire explosive revelation all started with a simple, knowing smirk. Pat McAfee leaned in toward the camera. He gave that look the look of a man who has just received a text message from someone way too high up on the food chain. And then he dropped a single line that hit the city of Cleveland with more force than a Myles Garrett helmet swing. Dillon Gabriel, he revealed, was not just starting because of his performance. Oh no, there was something else at play. Something that had been cooked up deep inside the secretive walls of the Browns' Berea headquarters. And in that one single instant, every single person in the Cleveland Browns front office looked as if they had just seen a ghost that was wearing a Colorado hoodie.
What do you think about whenever it comes to handling this entire situation? This is a tough situation for a third-round draft pick who's trying to make his career, and then a guy that's drafted 2 rounds after him is obviously the topic of conversation all offseason, all training camp, even when he gets his start, topic of conversation. He has maintained kind of locked-in, laser-like focus. I love the way he has handled it. He obviously has a chance with his arm. What do you expect from him with the Browns? And has he always been this guy that is like the utmost professional seemingly here?
Yeah, I'm with you. I go back to anytime you're looking at a young quarterback, I personally look at how many reps he had as a collegiate quarterback.
Now, Browns fans are certainly used to dysfunction. At this point, it is practically a franchise tradition. But this particular brand of chaos, this had layers. Dillon Gabriel, the quiet newcomer, the very guy who was supposed to just compete for a spot, had somehow managed to completely skip the entire waiting list and land himself right in QB1 territory. And meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, the golden name, the player who had half of Cleveland buying his jersey before he had even taken a single solitary snap, was unceremoniously shuffled to the side, like a nervous rookie at a veteran's high-stakes poker table.
Because we want to see Shedeur, let's grade it fairly. That's all I'm saying.
I graded it fairly. Like,
you really you said I want him to play bad so Shedeur can get
I do, but some teachers might want this kid to do bad, but when he turned that test in, she just got to grade that.
I believe Shedeur's better as well, but if we're going to grade, stop grading with bias.
All right, grading without bias. QBR for the game. Dillon Gabriel was a 38 on scale 0 to 100.
Rookie after 3 days of
QBR don't lie, man.
It doesn't lie.
Take the name off of it, bro. Just look at the numbers. The stats say the QBR.
And when Pat McAfee finally revealed what was really going on, that entire metaphorical poker table was completely flipped. According to the whispers, and apparently to McAfee's source who possesses a dangerously good memory, this decision was never about performance in camp. No, this was about politics. It was about comfort, and it was about a coaching staff that had chosen the perceived safety of predictability over the undeniable and perhaps intimidating spark of raw talent. Kevin Stefanski, it seems, wanted predictability, not personality. And Shedeur, he brought both of those qualities in equal and overwhelming doses. The very moment Pat McAfee dropped that bombshell, the entire NFL world went into DEFCON 1. ESPN was immediately up with their graphics. The Reddit threads were mutating by the hour, and the local Cleveland radio hosts all sounded as if they were broadcasting live from the scene of a natural disaster. Everyone was demanding answers, and absolutely nobody in the entire Browns building seemed to be ready to give any. And inside that now divided locker room, things reportedly got incredibly tense. One veteran player reportedly said that the room now felt split, like a high school cafeteria after a bad breakup. That is not exactly the kind of atmosphere you want just before your first preseason game, but Pat McAfee's bombshell reporting did not stop there. He then went on to claim that the decision to start Dillon Gabriel wasn't even a unanimous one among the coaching staff. A few of the assistant coaches, it seems, apparently believed that Shedeur possessed that one single intangible quality, that raw, uncoachable electricity, the kind of supreme, almost reckless confidence that either wins you the game or burns your entire house down trying.
Guy was at UCF for a few years, then he went to Norman, played at Oklahoma, and then obviously finished it in Eugene. And the only reason I bring all that up is this guy's dealt with a lot of different circumstances and different kind of pressures, especially when he stepped up from UCF to Oklahoma. And so I think that really hardens a guy, you know, when you deal with the ups and downs of playing quarterback at some of these high-profile places and you have so many reps. You know, that's why I think Brock Purdy was able so quickly after a four-year starter at Iowa State to be able to step into the NFL and seed the game pretty quickly. And I think Dillon Gabriel reminds me of that. You know, he reminds me of a guy that had a ton of reps. You put him in that offense with Kevin Stefanski, who understands how to attack and how to be decisive.
But Kevin Stefanski, ever the cautious and methodical engineer, wanted structure, not sparks. He wanted film room perfection, not a constant barrage of media fireworks. And that is precisely where this entire fragile situation began to unravel. Because the Cleveland Browns fans, they do not do safe. They have seen safe, and they have lived safe. And safe has gotten them a 6-11 record and a lifetime supply of emotional damage. So when Pat McAfee said what he said, it was as if someone had just handed every single long-suffering Browns fan a megaphone. And suddenly, the entire city was no longer just questioning the single decision, they were now questioning the entire flawed philosophy that was behind it. The local talk shows were calling it preseason sabotage. Twitter had unofficially renamed the team the Cleveland Politics. And one particularly dedicated fan even parked his car outside the team's facility with a giant homemade sign that read, "Start the star, not the substitute." Meanwhile, inside that now divided building, the mood had shifted from merely tense to downright toxic. And Shedeur's body language through all of this said everything. He was calm, he was focused, but you could tell he was quietly boiling underneath the surface. You could almost feel the raw competitive energy just radiating off of him, as he was just waiting for that one single "I told you so" moment. The coaching staff, however, was now in full-blown survival mode, and Kevin Stefanski's legendary poker face had finally cracked. During the team's practices, you could see the anxiety beginning to creep in. There were the overcorrections, there were the tight calls, and there were the extra unscheduled film sessions. He was no longer just coaching, he was now desperately trying to justify a decision that the entire country now had an opinion on.
What do you want me to really say about Dillon Gabriel over the next 3.5 hours? Well, he was composed. Great. You know how he conducted himself? He conducted himself how a career backup should conduct himself, where you just hope that you're able to hold down the fort until the regular starter comes back. The problem is, we don't have a regular starter that comes back. Well, we do, but nobody wants to see him. So nobody wants that to happen. So here we have to hope that Dillon Gabriel, a guy who is certainly limited, a guy who's smart enough to probably be a coach in the NFL someday, has to go out there and conduct an offense. And we just little bit. And we have to hope that Quinshon Judkins is able to carry us into the end zone, and we don't have a holding call on it. Because we got two guys there who are again replacing another guy who had replaced another guy who just...
And that is when the real fun began, because Pat McAfee then doubled down on his reporting the very next day, now saying that the Browns' own front office wasn't exactly on the same page either. Apparently, the team's ownership had absolutely loved the idea of a Sanders era. They saw the marketing potential, the fan base growth, and the incredible storyline. But Kevin Stefanski, he wasn't sold. He reportedly saw Shedeur as a long-term project, not as some kind of plug-and-play savior. So when Dillon Gabriel had outperformed his expectations in a few closed-door scrimmages, Stefanski saw his escape hatch, and he took it. And once that particular truth had hit social media, the entire city of Cleveland completely imploded. The sports analysts immediately started to compare the situation to the Baker versus Tyrod drama from years ago, but this time, the stakes were even higher, because back then, the city of Cleveland was just desperate for some stability, and now, they are desperate for some electricity, and the decision to bench Shedeur felt a lot like taking the batteries out of the entire franchise. And then, finally, came game day. Dillon Gabriel trotted out onto the field, and the crowd was buzzing with a very mixed energy. Half of them were supportive, and the other half were just waiting for his very first incomplete pass to turn into a full-blown storm of boos. The man was playing with a spotlight that was so hot it could have melted the turf, and ironically, he didn't even play that badly. But every single yard that he managed to gain just felt like a temporary extension on a very, very fragile lease.
Did Dillon Gabriel just lock up QB1 in Cleveland? In his first career start, he was 19 of 33, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And if the Vikings don't score here on their final drive under a minute to go, he likely leaves London with the win. But as good as those stats were, he was only 3 for 10 on passes 10 or more yards downfield. And the QBR of just 38 does leave a little to be desired, a lot of short passes. But this is a strong Vikings defense, and he was the first quarterback this year to have 2 passing touchdowns against them. But this Browns team does have a lot of other quarterback options. But what do you grade?
Pat McAfee's explosive reveal had completely and permanently changed the stakes. This was no longer just a simple quarterback battle. This was now a full-blown referendum on the Cleveland Browns' very identity. Were they a bold, modern team that was ready to embrace the flash? Or were they just the same old, cautious Rust Belt machine, desperately trying to look competent without ever having to take a real risk? And as the game rolled on, the sideline cameras caught every single subtle detail. They captured the subtle tension, the stolen glances, and the simmering frustration. You had Shedeur pacing near the benches with his arms folded. You had the coaches whispering urgently into their headsets. And you had Dillon Gabriel taking every single snap as if it were a final exam that he had not studied for. By halftime, Cleveland was not leading, but they were not losing either. And in the postgame, every single answer felt completely scripted. Every single explanation felt painfully safe. Stefanski used the word process far too many times. Gabriel deflected every single pointed question, and Shedeur just smiled his way through it all, but his silence was absolutely deafening. And back at the studio, Pat McAfee just smirked again. He did not need to say any more. The story was already telling itself. The city of Cleveland was now in its favorite and most familiar state, organized confusion. And the fallout, oh, it came, and it came fast, because within the next 48 hours, a series of anonymous locker room sources had started to feed the media a steady diet of tidbits about the growing tension and the palpable frustration inside the building.
I don't know what's more funny though. The guy yelling at him to the right or the dude to the left that just can't contain himself, that just wants to interrupt. And look, y'all got mad at me for saying it yesterday. Even people in Cleveland are saying it. He did okay. He managed the game. He got them just enough. The minute that he took a chance at the end of the game, he threw a pick. Got a second chance, and then he went short. Every pass he threw wasn't even over 5.5 yards. That's safe. That's okay. That's taking no chances and relying on everybody else to do their job.
The defense, as it turns out, apparently did not care who started. They just wanted the offense to be able to score some points before the fourth quarter for once. And that right there is the Cleveland Browns for you. Equal parts comedy and tragedy. Meanwhile, Shedeur's own camp stayed completely and strategically quiet, a move which somehow only made the entire situation even louder. There were no cryptic tweets, there were no tell-all interviews, just a display of relentless public work. Videos began to circulate of him throwing absolute lasers in practice, of him hitting impossibly tight windows, and of him generally outshining Dillon Gabriel in the team's drills. And suddenly the entire narrative flipped again. Maybe this wasn't over. Maybe the Browns had just lit their own very short fuse. And by the second week of training camp, you could feel the tension in the air like a thick, oppressive humidity. And Pat McAfee, of course, just kept on fueling it, not maliciously, but simply as a part of the show. And that is the true tragic beauty of it all. Cleveland's chaos does not even need to be exaggerated. It is completely self-sustaining. Behind closed doors, though, Kevin Stefanski was reportedly losing some serious ground. The reports were now hinting that a few of his assistant coaches were becoming privately frustrated with the situation. They saw the locker room split that was growing wider by the day. Some of them wanted to just rip the bandage off and start Shedeur, and the others, they feared that such a move would make Stefanski look weak and indecisive, and the one-word divide was now reportedly being used in the team's own internal meetings, and that is never ever a good sign, especially not this early in a season.
Yeah, I think there's always something to build on. No moral victories whatsoever, but I think regardless of result, week to week, there's a process, and more time you spend around anyone, you're gonna get more continuity, and that's, QB to receiver, that's QB to running back, that's us as a whole unit coming together really, and getting comfortable with our unit.
Pat McAfee, of course, knew exactly what he was doing. He kept the story alive, artfully threading just enough truth through a thick layer of sarcasm to keep the entire NFL talking about it. And the Cleveland Browns, they just played right into his hands. Every single defensive quote, every subtle eyebrow raise from a teammate, it all just became more evidence in the growing public case that the Cleveland Browns had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And then came the inevitable breaking point. In week 2 of the preseason, Dillon Gabriel struggled mightily, and Shedeur just stood there on the sideline, his helmet on, staring out at the field as if he were watching a movie where he already knew the ending. And in that one single moment, Pat McAfee's truth felt a lot like a prophecy. After the game, the press room looked less like a media scrum and more like a courtroom. Kevin Stefanski tried his best to sound composed, but it was painfully obvious that the heat was now on. The questions about his quarterback evaluation and his long-term plans started to fly, and while he managed to dodge every single one of them, the damage had already been done. The fans had made their verdict, and it was not in Dillon Gabriel's favor. The very next morning, Pat McAfee addressed the situation again, this time with that perfect signature mix of humor and chaos. He simply reminded everyone that the truth always, eventually, comes out in Cleveland, and that it usually does so through a leak, through a public meltdown, or through a combination of both, and his Cheshire Cat grin said it all. He did not have to name any names, because the Cleveland Browns had just outed themselves yet again.
I thought he played like you said. I thought he played a good game. First thing I said, damn, he tiny.
Oh, yeah, he's small.
I'm like, oh my goodness.
Like, what, maybe Baker height?
No, hell no. He wish you, man, huh? They listed him at 5'11", 5'10" and a quarter.
And back in Berea, the walls were now starting to close in. The players began to sense the inevitable shift. The offense was now running better in practice with Shedeur under center. The defense looked more alive. Even the coaching staff could no longer hide it. One assistant reportedly said that it felt like watching a dam crack in slow motion. And then it finally happened. The switch. It was quiet, it was unannounced, and it was buried deep within a midweek practice rotation. Shedeur Sanders had started taking the first team reps again. Officially, of course, nothing had changed. But unofficially, everything had. When that news finally broke, the entire city of Cleveland lit up. Social media completely and utterly exploded, and Pat McAfee, once again, was proven right. Not because he had predicted it, but because he had understood the Cleveland Browns better than the Cleveland Browns understood themselves. And the entire energy around the team had now completely flipped. The very same players who had looked so cautious just a week ago now looked genuinely inspired. The offense suddenly had a new rhythm, it had a new swagger, and it had a little bit of that much-needed danger. And Kevin Stefanski, he just pretended that this was all a part of the evaluation process. Sure, coach, whatever helps you sleep at night. Pat McAfee's initial reveal had done so much more than just expose a single questionable decision. It had exposed the very soul of the Cleveland Browns. This is a team that is forever torn between playing it safe and chasing something bigger. It is a team that is torn between sticking to a rigid plan and actually listening to the room. It is a team that is torn between just being competent and being, well, Cleveland. And for once, maybe all of that chaos had actually worked in their favor. Because the very moment that Shedeur took that first team snap, the entire city had shifted. This was no longer about analytics. This was now about hope. The reckless, the irrational, the beautiful kind of hope that only the long-suffering Cleveland Browns fans can truly understand.
So Dillon Gabriel just made his first start against the Minnesota Vikings, and unfortunately he was unable to get the victory. Carson Wentz had an insane drive to win the game 21-17. But my thoughts on Gabriel in this game, I thought it's a very promising start. I'd probably give it like a B+, just because he didn't really put the ball in harm's way. Maybe one time there could have potentially been a pick, but it was a lot of quick, short passes, and I thought that for what the Browns had really asked him to do in this game, he looked really, really good against a really good Vikings defense that came in top 10, 9th best scoring defense, and Gabriel matched Joe Flacco's touchdowns, passing touchdowns.
By week 3, the Cleveland Browns felt transformed. They were energized, they were dangerous, and while still undeniably flawed, they were finally thrillingly fun. Pat McAfee's name now echoed through the city's sports bars and social media feeds. Half the city celebrated him as a truth teller, the other half wanted him excommunicated from the airwaves for life. But deep down, beneath all the noise, they all understood one fundamental truth. He had simply articulated the one thing everyone else was too afraid to admit out loud. This was never just a quarterback problem. This was a full-blown identity crisis. Dillon Gabriel represented safety, Shedeur Sanders represented risk, and in the unforgiving arena of the NFL, playing it safe is the most certain path to losing big. And so as the initial dust settled and the Browns prepared for yet another wild season, one singular truth emerged, standing taller than all the rest. Pat McAfee had not just revealed a simple secret, he had held up a mirror and revealed the very soul of Cleveland itself, messy, profoundly passionate, and perpetually teetering just one single step away from either glorious greatness or spectacular disaster, depending on the week, because in Cleveland, it is never ever just football. It is high theater, it is beautiful chaos, it is a profound faith perpetually wrapped in a deep abiding frustration, and thanks to Pat McAfee's brutal little truth, the curtain was pulled back just enough for everyone to finally see just how deep the glorious madness truly runs, and somehow that is exactly what makes it all so beautiful.